Hi, and welcome back to my channel where I'm going to cover the Cleric's Domain of the Grave class specialization from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The clerics of this domain are those who generally look to ensure the dead rest peacefully, and will work to destroy those undead to the best of their abilities. They will generally worship the gods who deal with the living to death transition, such as Kelemvor, Anubis, and Hades, those essentially who control the gateways to the realms of the dead. Unlike other classes, however, clerics need to choose their domain at level 1, which makes sense if you think about it for a moment, because a cleric needs to know who they're worshipping in order for their magic to function. But it could mean that this video could be a little longer than normal, but I will do my best to keep it shorter. Now, I already have completed a cleric of the life domain and recorded that. Though it was a little bit long-winded and it is using my old video format, it's still possible to get an idea as to what the cleric-only features are from that video. And I will look to ensure that that video is linked in the description below. However, I have also recorded a video recently on the Forge domain, which has a few adjustments that you might want to make in relation to the overall class. So I do highly recommend that you look at both of these videos. And that's primarily because some of the steps we'll be taking in this video will be kind of similar to the Forge Domains video. But the first thing I have to do is create a basic character. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now and show you the Grave Domain specific options that we need to choose. So I've gone ahead and set the race and the stats for this particular character already. I rolled the stats off screen. And it's very similar to the ones that I had in the Forge Domain. However, I'm now ready to choose the Cleric class, and the reason why I'm showing this is because it's relevant to this video. By selecting the Cleric class, we now also get to choose our class specialization. And if you go ahead and choose that, then you now have your specialization set here. I'm then going to quickly go through and finish configuring everything else for this particular character, and then once I've saved it, I will bring you back. So I've saved the character, and we now have a level 1 cleric who's most likely missing a couple skills. Nope, this time it worked. Good. We have all of our abilities, and we have a good chunk of our actions, although they are slightly a bit... Get rid of that. Messed up. This is actually supposed to be a spell-based group, not a power group. And there, that sets everything up for that. Now we can go ahead and prepare our spells as per normal. And they will disappear when we go ahead and burn through our spell slots, which is what we want. With our character now created, the first feature your character will gain through the Grave Domain is called Grave Domain Spells, and it is available right away at level 1. This feature grants you spells that you will learn automatically at the clerical levels defined, as you can see in the information sheet there. So Revivify, for instance, is acquired when your character reaches a clerical level of 5. You initially gain 2 spells at level 1, but you will also gain 2 additional spells every 2 levels up to level 9, so at levels 3, 5, 7, and 9. These spells do not count against your prepared spells list. In fact, they are always available for you to be able to use, and they won't impact the number of spells that you can prepare each day. The only restriction is going to be that in order to cast the spell, you must have a free spell slot. So how do you make sure that these exist in your character sheet without them conflicting and confusing yourself over time? Well, the best way to do this is to drag in this feature and create a new, initially power group called Grave Domain. Oops, Domain Spells specifically. Now, the reason why I've done that is I wanted the power group. I can eventually get rid of this completely in a second. But what I want to do is convert this to a spell group as opposed to just a power group. And I want to set it up so that it has our wisdom modifier, configured for everything here. There we go. And we want to leave this blank. Now that I have that ready, I can drag in my first 2 spells. And you'll see it will create a new group called Grave Domain Spells Level 1. We can now get rid of this, and it will go away. And then we can just simply drag and drop our second one in here. The reason why I have done that is because it allows us to separate spells that we have to prepare from those that we don't. So if I go ahead and put this into a combat mode and set up the action group here, or action mode, we can see that these spells become available. But let's see what happens when I unprepare these spells. I'm going to go ahead and go back to preparation. If these spells aren't prepared, they shouldn't be available. I forgot. Fantasy Grounds, the way it organizes it is that even if you have a spell that isn't prepared, it will keep it shown even if you're in combat mode. However, at least for clerics. However, when you actually go through and use them, they go away. And you'll see that the first two spells that we have added to our Grave Domain spell group have also gone away. That means this is working the way that we want it to. Additionally, at level 1, your character will gain access to the Circle of Mortality feature, which allows your character to use the maximum possible value of a dice roll when attempting to heal a character when they are at 0 hit points. For example, if your level 1 character were to cast Cure Wounds on a party member who was reduced to 0 hit points during combat, you would be able to make use of the full amount of healing points that you could submit. So rather than rolling 1d8 on your die roll, then adding your wisdom modifier, you would simply heal them 8 points plus your character's wisdom modifier. Another example would be, let's say your character is now level 7, and you chose to cast Cure Wounds on another party member who is reduced to 0 hit points, but this time you're using a 3rd level spell slot. Your character would be able to usually use 3d8 and take that total and add in your wisdom modifier. But with this feature, you simply state that you are going to heal 24 plus your character's wisdom modifier for total hit points. In addition to that, your character will also learn the Spare the Dying cantrip, which does not count towards your character's total known cantrips. It is in addition to them. In addition to gaining the cantrip, its range is now increased from a touch range to a 30-foot range-based ability to cast it. So if you have a party member who has just gone down and they're in the process of making saving throws against death saving throws, then you would be able to, no matter your distance, as long as you're within 30 feet of them, still be able to use the cantrip and stabilize that party member. In addition to that, the cantrip now also becomes a bonus action related item. So instead of you having to use an action to spare the dying, you can do your primary attack and then make use of this cantrip to save someone who might be in the process of dying. So let's go ahead and set this up. The first thing I'm going to want to do is look for the Spare the Dying cantrip. So I'm just going to go to Spells and look for Spare the Dying. I want the Player's Handbook version. And it's interesting that, where did you go? It threw it under an entirely different group. Okay, so that might not actually be a bad idea, is to let it drop where it is. Now, these two groups were created through the character wizard. If you created them manually, the spell would have just simply dropped into here. Not that big of a deal. In this case, I'm going to leave it separate. So that sets up the cantrip. Now let's go ahead and set up some examples as to what you need to do for Circle of Mortality. The first thing I'm going to open up here is the description on the Cure Wounds. I'm then going to drag Circle of Mortality into place here. I'm going to create a new power group for it called Grave Domains. Grave Domain, rather. I am then going to add a new heal effect. And the reason why I'm making this a heal effect is it's something that you don't have to roll a dice for, and it's just easier to deal with in some cases. So let's set up a level 1 healing roll, if you will, when it comes to Cure Wounds here. Instead of making use of this and having to figure out how to make the 8 stick, if you will, all we want to do is add a new healing effect, and we're just going to say 8, and then plus the wisdom modifier here, and that means that you will be instantly healing with a 1d8 roll 12 hit points. If you wanted to, for example, at later levels, let's open up Cure Wounds again. Let's say you wanted to be able to set it up where you were making use of a second level spell slot. Then what you would do is create a new effect. Again, it could be a heal effect. Modify that one, and instead of it being 8 points, it would be a 16-point bonus here. And again, it would be your wisdom modifier, and now we're doing 20 hit points. So you can see how this would work. And all you have to do is just quote-unquote preload the various combination of rolls that you might want to use, and then just pick the right one when you're in the Actions tab, because they should show up here. So that'd be 12, that'd be 12 there, that'll be 20 there. That's it. That sets up Circle of Mortality, rather. The last feature your character is going to gain at level 1 is called Eyes of the Grave, and it gives your character a means to detect undead creatures within 60 feet of where your character currently stands, but it does have a few limitations. The first limitation is that any undead behind full cover will not be detected, but your character will sense anything that is in the open, or behind partial or three-quarters cover. The next restriction is that any undead creatures in the area cannot be protected against divination. If there are undead that are covered by that protection spell, you won't be able to sense them. The final limitation is that you really only get a sense that something is there. You don't get to tell what type of undead or what its capabilities are. You just know that there's something there. You will be able to use this feature a number of times equal to your character's wisdom modifier before they will need to complete a long rest. But other than that, this still sounds like a very useful feature. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this into place. I'm going to set this back to group, move this into the grave domain. And other than the number of times that it can be used, there really isn't much to set up here. So this character has a +4 wisdom modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare that for 4 daily uses. And now we have 4 uses that can come into play, and it will disappear once those uses are gone. There we go. When your character reaches level 2, they will gain access to the Channel Divinity Path to the Grave feature, which allows your character to mark a creature with a curse that makes them vulnerable to the next attack. This means that if a sword was used to attack the creature, the target is vulnerable to the slashing damage type, which means they would receive double the amount of damage normally taken. This effect would essentially make them vulnerable to all damage types, so setting up this effect would be relatively easy to do. But there is something else that we need to take into account. Channel Divinity Path to the Grave is linked to your primary Channel Divinity Turn on Dead capability. So we need to ensure that this functionality exists in a very specific way. So I'm going to go ahead and drop Channel Divinity into place here, and I'm going to create a power group called Channel Divinity, and I'm going to update this to be Turn on Dead. Then I'm going to close that. I'm then going to set this up so that there is 1 daily use. You won't get any more uses until you reach level 6, where you get 2 uses, and then 3 at level 18. And that is according to the Channel Divinity feature information here, right on this particular paragraph here. We then want to drag this into place and add it to this particular group. And the reason we want to do that is as follows. If you use this feature, you will lose the ability to use Channel Divinity Turn on Dead until your character has completed a short or long rest, I believe. Yeah, short or long rest. So that means if I click that, you'll see that this grays out. Or if I click this, you'll see that this grays out. Excellent. That is linked, which means that's working the way we want it to. The next thing we need to do is actually add the effect. So I'm going to right-click on Path to the Grave and create a new effect. And Path to the Grave, semicolon. And what we want to do is create VULN, colon, all. Because that's exactly what's going to happen. And we will also want to set this up that it's going to expire on the next roll. And that is defined here. The next time you or an ally of yours hits the cursed creature with an attack, the creature has vulnerability to all of that attack's damage, and then the curse ends. So there is a means or requirement, if you will, for any future attacks not to have this vulnerability. It's a really good means of adding vulnerability to a creature you might be a little underleveled to deal with, for example, but you do have limitations on how often you can use it. So how does this work in a combat scenario? Well, first off, I'm going to get my spells back. I'm going to set up the Cleric so that they have the initiative. I am then going to target this Efreet. Now, it might not be vulnerable to any damage. It might have some resistance. In fact, I know the Succubus does. But I'm targeting this particular target for the purposes of demonstrating the effect. I'm now going to click on that to apply the effect on the Efreet. And that's assuming I used the feature. Now, let's say another turn comes around, nobody else actually hits the Efreet. Well, the effect is still active. So now it's this character's turn again. I'm going to go ahead and hit with a 19, and then I'm going to roll the damage. And you'll see here that the total amount of damage that we did here was doubled because they were vulnerable. That's working the way that we want it to. In addition to that, the effect went away. Excellent. So when your character reaches level 3, they're going to gain access to 2 additional Grave Domain spells. And when you add them to your character sheet, you're going to want to be very careful as to where you drop them into place. You want to make sure that you drop them into an existing Grave Domain spells group. And I'll show you why. If I drop this one into here, it's going to create this group. But if I drop it here, it's going to create just a normal spell group. And that will require you to go through and actually prep it and all that jazz. We don't want that there. In fact, we want this in this group. And that will keep the spells that don't count towards your preparation list separate from those that do. And that's all we need to do for level 3. At level 5, we want to do the exact same thing. We want to make sure that we drop these 2 new Grave Domain spells onto an existing Grave Domain power group or spell group so that they apply appropriately and drop into an equivalent group. And that's because it's going to carry forward all of the settings that we have here, because this level 3 group, this level 2 group, and this level 1 group are all linked together. At level 6, you're going to want to make sure that you go ahead and modify your power group for your channel Divinity. And make sure it sets it up for 2 daily uses as opposed to just 1. At level 6, your character is going to gain access to a new feature called Sentinel at Death's Door, which allows your character to make use of a reaction on a creature within 30 feet of your character that can be seen by your character. When you make use of this reaction, you can change what would have been a critical hit into a non-critical hit, canceling out all of the effects the critical hit would have normally triggered. This can be tricky to do. If you're using a pen and paper module, then simply roll the damage as normal. But within Fantasy Grounds, your character is going to have to add an effect to the creature in question before the damage is rolled. Now, as this is a reaction, you can only make use of this feature if your character has already not made use of a reaction, and the total number of times your character can use it is equal to your character's wisdom modifier before they would once again have to complete a long rest to regain any uses. So let's go ahead and set this up. We're going to drop it up here and then copy this Grave Domain and apply it to this feature. Now, I indicated that there's an effect that you would have to add. And what we want to do is set up an immunity to critical damage. So Sentinel at Death's Door, semicolon, immune, colon, critical. And it will be on target and it will expire on the next roll. So let's go ahead and showcase this. So as you can see, it took me a little while to actually get a critical hit. In this particular case, I've got one. And it's the Efreet's turn. But this Cleric can now make use of this reaction and drop this effect on the Ape. Now when the Cleric, or when the Efreet rolls the damage, it should not come up with critical hits. you will see that it partially resisted. Even though it still died because it had very few hit points, it only had 19, the total amount of damage rolled was 40. With the critical immunity there, it canceled out the critical damage and only took the amount of damage that was actually rolled normally. The amount that was classified as critical damage is 16 hit points. 40 subtract 16 is 24 hit points, so that is working the way that it should. But we still have to set up the number of uses. So let's go ahead and modify this by putting it into preparation. And we want Sentinel at death's door. We want to set 4 there because this character has a +4 wisdom modifier. And now we have a usage limitation that comes into play, of which we just used one. At level 7, your character is going to gain some additional Grave Domain spells here. So let's drop these into place. And now we have a level 4 domain group. There we go. The next feature your character is going to gain is called Potent Spellcasting, and it is acquired at level 8. And what it does is it gives your character a means to add their wisdom modifier to any damage they deal to a target using a clerical cantrip. So what does that mean? Well, there are a couple of ways that you can go about making use of this. You can simply modify an existing cantrip and add a +4 wisdom bonus to it. So if we go here, you can see that if we add our wisdom bonus to it, it adds a +4 here. But I would argue there is a different way to do this. Now, give me a second here. I got to go all the way through this list. There. Now it's canceled. What we should probably do is add Potent Spellcasting as a separate feature on our group here and link it into the Grave Domain. And then when you go through and add the effect, we want to go through and make sure we add a damage effect. Now I could do that there, or I could do this. I'm going to do this through an effect, but there are 2 ways that we could do this. So I'm going to call this Potent Spellcasting, semicolon, DMG, and in brackets, I'm going to put WIS, and close brackets. And it's going to be on self. Now, when I click this effect, what we should see is that we have a damage of 4. There is one modification that I still need to make to this, though. And that is that I need this to expire on the next roll. So, let me quickly set up the Cleric as the one with the action token. I'm going to apply this effect to my character with the damage +4, and then I'm going to roll. Let's say that I rolled and attacked this Ifrit with the Sacred Flame cantrip. Let's say that they failed their saving throw. I would then drag and drop this damage there, and it would apply the additional +4 bonus to it as part of that process and remove the effect. Excellent. I think that's the best way to do it, to be honest. The second option would be to, instead of using an effect like I did there, go ahead and create a damage-specific effect and modify that to just simply do your wisdom modifier. And then what you would do is you would roll your cantrip damage first. So let's go ahead and do that. So I would scroll down and deal with my cantrip damage first, dropping that into place. But then I would have to come back up here and drop this D4 onto the Ifrit as well. Kind of the same thing. I prefer the effect because the effect automatically goes away. You only have to worry about clicking the effect on your way down to finding the cantrip, and you're good to go. It's a little bit quicker in my opinion. So level 9 sees your character gaining the last of its domain spells. So I'm going to drop these into place. And it doesn't matter where you drop them, as long as you drop them within an existing Grave Domain spell group, it will automatically create a linked group and put those spells there. And that sets everything up and finishes everything we need to do for our Grave Domain spells. The last feature your character is going to gain happens at level 17, and it is called Keeper of Souls. With this feature, your character can make use of the life force of a creature that has just died, and is visible to the character and is within 60 feet of your character. When you do that, you can then choose to heal your own character or another character of your choice a number of hit points equal to the dead creature's hit dice. So if the creature that just died had 2 hit die, then you would be able to heal 2 hit points to anyone you choose to place it on, as long as they are also within 60 feet of your character. This feature is special in that it does not use an action, reaction, or bonus action to make use of. The effect is triggered when a creature dies and you choose to make use of it. However, it can only be used once per turn, and you can only source 1 creature of their life force. This means if 3 creatures happen to die on a given turn and you choose to use this feature, you only get to use 1 of those creatures' hit dice for your healing effect. The other 2 creatures essentially have their hit die or life force escape while you're focusing on trying to capture the life force of the creature you're looking to make use of it from. Your character would also be unable to make use of this feature again until the start of your next turn, meaning that the creature has to die after the start of that turn in order for you to be able to make use of the life force. So this one is going to be extremely tricky and highly manual in order to go through and figure out. The first part is that you will need to ensure you work with the Dungeon Master in order to add the hit points, because they're going to be the ones that have to tell you what that creature's hit die is. So if you go up against a 12 hit die creature, you will need to know that you can heal somebody 12 hit die. The rest you can do on your own. You can drag this into place, add it to the Grave Domain, and have what's known as an empty heal effect or a actual effect there. But I would recommend going with the heal effect in this case, because you're going to be instantly dropping these points onto a particular person or creature. You then want to preload an empty bonus entry here, if you will. So I'm going to just use 2 hit points because or 1 hit point for now, because chances are the first kind of creature you're going to run into is only going to have 1 hit die. Now the other thing is it doesn't state what happens if you're going up against a creature that has a quarter number of hit points, or their hit dice rather. I would assume it would be 1, but it doesn't actually state, and I can't find any information online to clarify that. Then what would happen is if the Dungeon Master comes back and says the creature is a 2 hit die creature, you would simply update this, add that, or create a new one and preload it with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And then all you would then do is drag and drop the healing effect onto the target in question. Grave Domain Clerics look like an interesting class to play, as the class gains many powerful capabilities that would help a party who is constantly fighting the undead or heal characters far more effectively while in a deadly battle. However, this does bring us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.